first instance, you look at it, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. But people in strategy globally talk about mental buckets. Some will talk about bucket list or whatever. But, you know, for us in this room, what we are trying to achieve is to get as many projects as possible to attract green financing and also get private sector funding. So the first bucket talks about NDC and MTNDB compliance. What does that mean? It means that, you know, as we sit and as we prepare projects and as we talk to project sponsors and even work closely among ourselves, even if it be in the bathroom or wherever we are, when you wake up in the morning, you just think about it. The first mental bucket is, do I have projects that are NDC or MTNDP aligned? And now, what does that mean, really? I don't think it's that difficult. Chizoba is going to take that shortly. Many of the guidelines or compliance factors are not too difficult to meet. It will, for instance, on a project, being green smart may just be that we have to use materials that are environmentally friendly. Issues like making the projects pro-poor, gender sensitive, you know, and environmentally compliant also matters. Hardly do we see any project that doesn't have an EIA, you know, being pushed forward right now at the MDA's level. So this is also one of the factors that we need to look at. So, you know, first mental bucket is, okay, does this project meet the NDC and MTNDP compliance process? And you could see we have the DST beside that. Even if we are not able to do that by ourselves, we can just run it through the DST, and then we'll be able to know if it meets the guidelines or not. The next one will be that, you know, financiers don't like small projects. We've said along the all the while that we need projects that at least $1 million, that need $1 million in terms of capex. So again, as you come across these projects, it may be difficult to see some that are like 500 million or 1 billion. But we've talked about aggregation earlier on. We've seen so many solar projects now, street lights and all of that. You know, this may not be bankable, but we can aggregate many of them, you know, and bring them together in a cluster. And by the time you do that, before you realize it, you may be looking at $1 billion or 2. And then we have the Rural Electrification Agency that is able to help us around, you know, the bankability process and the sustainability in terms of operation and maintenance mechanisms for this kind of projects. So, you know, don't think it's too difficult to get the $1 million projects, but by the time you aggregate, I'm sure we can get there. And then next level will be, again, as you think about this project, is this ongoing or is it a new one? If it's ongoing, the probability is there that the project already has funding. But again, we have too many abandoned projects nationally. I think at the last count, there's about 12,000 abandoned projects. So not all ongoing projects have funding. So some of these can be resuscitated. You can look at them and put them through, you know, the alternative financing mechanism mode by speaking to financiers. You know, UK-NIAV is there to help. We can provide some form of project preparation and development to see how these projects can meet bankability thresholds. So, and then the last one, once these projects have been identified, we can then decide that, okay, what do we do with them? Is it just operation and maintenance that we want to do? Or we need to get more money to take this project to financial and technical close? So alternative financing mechanism approach will come in. We'll look at them through PPP. Are they suitable for PPP projects? Do we need to just privatize them and, you know, take them through the PPE privatization process, or does it go through the ICRC? So that's the process we take this project through. So as we think, as we wake up, as we conceive, as we speak to project promoters, let's just have at the back of our mind that these mental buckets are very important, you know, in helping the country, in greening our projects and in attracting private sector funding for green projects. Green projects are not extra that are so difficult to find or meet. There are so many of them around. We just need to put them through the framework that we have, which the DST provides for. So I think that's it for now. Chizoba, who is our expert on the DST and the climate finance database, will take us through how to get aligned with the NDC and National Development Plan. And then if they are able to get to that end there, we have the climate finance database that has a lot of financiers who are able to, look at the projects and provide the funding. So that's it for now. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Do we all have our Excel spreadsheets open? Okay, and thanks to my colleagues for really providing the context that really sets the intent and direction for the work. Yeah, so my colleagues have already set the context, provided context for what we're about to do, and we want to demo the decision support tool. I think it's important to also still, once again, now we know already from the previous presentations that the government has set out the national development priorities over the medium term between now and 2025. And my colleague Andreas also introduced the NDCs, which is Nigeria's climate change priorities between now and 2030. And the government also intends to invest in critical economic and social infrastructure that would help implement the national development priorities as well as the climate change priorities, the NDC targets. And a critical success factor would be ensuring that there is alignment between that the projects in the national budget actually reflects these national development priorities as well as the climate targets, And this is really where the decision support tool comes in. So the decision support tool will help you select projects that are aligned with both the NTNDP priorities that we'll highlight in the next few minutes and the NDC targets as well. And today from our exercise and going forward would be to produce a list of projects, like I've mentioned before, that are NTNDP and NDC aligned, but also projects that you can put forward to DFIs for alternatives for funding. And DFIs have said so far that NDCs, alignment with NDCs is a key criteria for funding projects. So it's critical that when selecting projects that we ensure that you're NDC aligned. And also important to add before we continue that while there's the drive towards implementing NDCs, we've also focused on the NTNDP as well, because focusing only on achieving our climate priorities could jeopardize all the national development priorities as well. One is to make sure that when we're selecting projects, when we're selecting potentially green projects, that we are focused on sectors that are within the national, we're focused on conceptualizing or identifying these green projects, priority sectors for the government, national development sectors for the government. So before we start, I will just walk you very quickly through provide a high-level overview of how the DST works. So the sequence of activities. So first of all, this is a project inventory tab, and this is where we're going to build out our pipeline of projects that we intend to screen. And here you can see the data set here. We have the project. So this is our data set. This is the list of projects. There are about, apologies for that. So while my colleague tries to distribute the new Excel spreadsheet, we'll walk through the sequence of activities that we'll carry out over the next few minutes. So first of all, on the first tab, you have your project inventory tab. the spreadsheet on the version you have now. The project inventory tab. And here we have the tend to screen now. This, you will see that the project inventory tab has provides the information on each of these projects. We have the project code, the project name, code, the project name, the anchor MDAs and sub-agencies, as well as the sector. We want to know whether the project is a new project or ongoing project. It's an ongoing project or a new project. And finally, the CapEx size for the MTSS period. And this Excel spreadsheet could also serve as an internal database for you as well to just store information about the projects, store project information that you have. On the next tab, we have project screening parameters. So on the first tab, on the project inventory tab, we have a list of projects. I've left the first two rows empty so we can work together to populate those rows. But first of all, we're going to just provide a high-level overview of how the DST works and the activities over the next few minutes. So first of all, on this project inventory tab, we're going to build out our pipeline of projects for screening. We're going to fill in the project data, and that will be the identification number, the project name, the anchor MDA sub status, that's whether it's a new project or an ongoing project, and finally the CapEx size, the capital. Here you see that we have our project identification numbers. So once we have populated this sheet, the numbers, the IDs are transposed into the fifth column of the project screening tab, so that it's easier for us to assign scores to scores. We will move on to our prioritization metrics, which is really the output from our screening exercise. And it's still the project inventory, but now in a and the main output here in the column D and E, where here you can see the project scores, and it's ranked in descending orders from projects that meet the criteria, from the highest ranking projects to the lowest, and the next tab will be projects that potentially qualify for PPPs. So let's begin the project screening process. On this tab here highlighted, we're going on the Excel spreadsheet, the tab that reads project inventory. On the lower left corner of the Excel spreadsheet, you'll see a tab there, project inventory. Good. We're going to scroll up. There are two blank rows, and we're going to fill the information there together using the data set that we have on the Word documents. If you haven't opened your Word documents, you can just walk along with what you see on the screen. So on the first tab, we're going to type in the project identification number, and we'll name this to be demo 1. On the second column, we're going to put in the project name, and it's here we have 9 fast priority projects from the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. So you can just copy across. Under the MDA tab, we're going to fill in Ministry of Petroleum Resources. That's the anchor MDA. So from the Word document, So that work document, that's a good question. So if you take a step back, that work document is the pipeline of projects you have within your MDAs. But what we are trying to do here, the main output from this workshop is to identify a list of projects that align with national development priorities and climate targets as well. So what we want to do is to make sure that when you're sending projects from your MDA budget to the national budget, that those projects are actually aligned with these government priorities, the NDP priorities and the NDC priorities as well. So the Word document in reality is your own pipeline of projects right now that you have within your MDA. Exactly. So your Word document, I mentioned before that this project inventory tab can actually be used as an internal Excel-based database of the projects you have within your MDAs. Whatever form you have your list of projects now, whether it's a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, you can transfer that information into the project inventory tab of this decision support tool. Document is really just dummy data. That is just information, a data set for you that will help you transfer the information into this project inventory sheet, just so it's an interactive exercise and we're all working along together.
That tends to be ministry department for leaders. This, of course, you have project identification codes when you create projects. What we've done is to just from the 2022 budget, and we just want to use that to show you can follow.
Thank you, Dayo. Can we continue? It's not working. Okay, so we're going to continue. And from our Word document, we can see that the sector it's listed there as industrial gas, and the project is an ongoing project. So we're going to transfer that information as well. And we're going to copy the CapEx size as well into the Excel spreadsheet. We can repeat the same process for
Another disaster allocation.
Do you need more time? Should we continue? Okay. So now we have 12 projects here that we're going to walk through the screening process. Just to stress again that this can be used as an internal database for your projects. Now we've completed the project data and we move on to the next tab, which is the project screening tab. You'll see that here, the numbers, the project identification numbers have been transposed to this cell, the 5th row on your project screening tab. Have we moved on to the next tab? The lower left corner, you'll see the tab, project screening tab. Okay, good. And here we have the pre-selection criteria set out already. And we call this pre-selection criteria because the DST is a high-level screening tool. And like I mentioned before, what we're really trying to do here is to ensure that these projects align with MTNDP and NDC priorities. When we have our output from this spreadsheet, then it's expected that the next step would be to quantify the climate impacts or the climate impacts for NDCs, as well as the number of perhaps beneficiaries and the social inclusion or environmental impacts of these projects. Now, the first set of parameters are the NTNDP, the National Development Parameters. And you see that the government's focus infrastructure sector here is listed as we have the transportation sector as a focus sector for the Nigerian government. We have power on alternative energy, housing and urban development, amongst others. And here we've set out the economic growth and development priorities for the Nigerian government as well. And here there's that key focus on agriculture and food security, oil and gas as we transition to a greener economy. And there's also manufacturing and industrialization. The last set of priorities on the national development priorities are the human capital and social development priorities. And here we have health and education, water resources, and sanitation, amongst others. And if you look at the NDP, you'd see that this is lifted directly from the NDP. For instance, in 2025, priorities change. You can modify this Excel spreadsheet now with the priorities set out for the government in the future. So this directly aligns with what you have in the NDP, and you can modify these documents. I'll show you. For instance, if in 2023 one of the focused infrastructure sectors become, should I say, let's just say alternative energy again, right? You could easily erase this and modify that section, right? So it's a very
and come up with different other priorities. What are the current priorities? That's what we are doing straight from the national development plan in here. Workshops and processes that we want to do. Asking you to prepare projects to submit. What the federal government's priorities are, and you are making. I think that's fair, right?
perfect. The next set of parameters we have are Nigeria's NDC targets. And you see here that there's a focus on increasing on-grid and off-grid electricity from renewables. There's improving energy efficiency, shifting from air and car to high-speed rail and mass transit, climate smart agriculture, amongst others. And the last set of screening criteria would be the pre-feasibility criteria. And what we are trying to find out here is if these projects, individual projects, can be implemented within the existing legal and regulatory framework. Are there expectations are there maybe implementation delay expectations? We identify that from the get-go. And are these projects commercially viable for the private sector? Commercially viable as PP, to be implemented as PPPs. So now we'll start with I'll scroll back up and we start the actual screening exercise. Our first project here, Demo 1, is an oil and gas project. And we're going to assign scores of 1 for each indicator, for each indicator that it aligns with. So for an oil and gas project, under the infrastructure focus sectors, we can see that under oil and gas, under the infrastructure focus sectors, there's really no column at this time that we can check. So we'll move on to the economic growth and development priorities. And then we have oil and gas. So when we scroll down to cell D15, under Demo 1, we assign a score of 1 for oil and gas. Oil and gas, under the MTN, under the NDP priorities. So Demo 1 is an oil and gas project. So we're going to assign a score of 1. So it's within a priority sector or focus area for the government. So we'll assign a score of 1 for the indicator or the parameter that it aligns with.
Can you use? I noticed that some people can you just matrix and they're trying to copy inside there.
Okay, so the data you have from your work document should only be copied into the project inventory tab. Nothing else should be modified on the project screening and prioritization matrix tabs. We're just going to assign scores on those tabs and do absolutely nothing on the project screening, on the prioritization tab. Everything is automated on that part. So the data we have on the Word document, just to clarify, it's only for the project inventory tab. That information is automatically transferred, like we've seen, to the project screening tab, the project reference numbers. So have we assigned that score? Can we move on?
The project screening as of your project. What is your project? Something is allowing you
So it's this oil and gas project.
all the ship sources are when it takes it from information.
Okay, so we've assigned that score under the NDP priorities for our first project, Demo 1. And now we'll move on to the NDC priorities. Remember, this is an oil and gas project, and we see here that it really doesn't fit in anyway. It doesn't align in any of the NDC priorities. So we're going to skip that as well. So far it has only a score of 1. We move on to the pre-feasibility.
And talk through each of those NDC in terms of this particular project. It doesn't align just on the first one.
Okay.
So when you are doing the oil and gas project, it doesn't.
Okay,
Does it
we
reduce
can
CO2?
do that for the first one.
Yeah, just for the first one.
Okay, thank you. So for the first project, we'll just take it a step back. For demo one, which is an oil and gas project, if we walk through the MTNDP, the NDP priorities, the infrastructure focused sectors are transportation, power and alternative energy, housing and urban development, digital economy, bioeconomy, science, tech and innovation, financial sector and capital markets. There's no column to check there. When we move on to priority areas for economic growth and development, we have agriculture, food security, and rural development.
Anyone, what is the title of that project? The name of the project. Mine oil and gas. You all understand what all of it. Project against these priorities. So that mine oil and gas project, is it sector? She's now going through the sum of those. Oil and gas, is it transportation? No. And urban development? No. Is it digital economy? Can't go anything there against that project. So now she's going into test each of this again. Is agriculture, food security and rural development, manufacturing and industrialization, oil and gas. Yes, so that's why she has got it the once. Okay. You will need to go. So let's continue.
On to the NDC priorities, the climate change, environment and climate change priorities. Here we have reducing CO2 emissions, increasing on-grid electricity, on-grid and off-grid electricity from renewables, improving energy efficiency, reduce gas flaring, reduce grid transmission and distribution losses. We go further down to increasing access to drinking water sources, increased access to improved sanitation facilities. And we see that this doesn't meet any NDC priority as expected. Yes, expected because, I mean, yeah. Then we move on to the pre-feasibility analysis. As we mentioned before, that here we're just trying to find out if we can implement these projects within the existing legal and regulatory framework. We want to find out if there are going to be any implementation delays. We want to find out if these projects could be commercially viable. So we're going to go through the indicators. The first one is, can this project be implemented within existing change any laws to allow us to deliver this project? If the answer, we don't have that answer here right now, but for this particular question, we're going to assume that no, we don't need to change any laws. So that scores 1. So you just put 1 against. And 0, yes, it's binary scoring. 1 or 0, yes. Field project. Actually, that should be is the project a brownfield project, because last year the government prioritized ongoing projects. They thought to complete ongoing projects before phasing in. So let's assign a score of what should we say? Yeah, new project. So we're going to, is that, let's see. So here it's ongoing, right? So can you change from the national budget? Yes, it's ongoing. Yes. So, yes. So here, can we change greenfield to brownfield or ongoing? Let's just change it to ongoing.
To make
Make it easier.
project is ongoing.
Green project.
So if you see,
If it's new, it's zero. But this oil and gas project now, from our project inventory tab, you see it's an ongoing project. So we assign a score of 1. So this is a positive scoring process. If it meets. Sorry? Yes, so we just ask that you change it to ongoing. Yes, it's easier to explain that way. Yes. Yes, project is ongoing. So let's change that to it's a project ongoing. And we assign a score of 1. So it's a positive scoring process. If it meets that criteria, you assign a score of 1. If it doesn't, 0, you can leave it blank. So we're going to assign a score of 1 since the oil and gas project is an ongoing project. Next, from your concept note or project information document, you want to find out if the project objectives and the output requirements are measurable, if they're SMART, that's specific, if they're measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Dayo, do you want to talk them through SMART indicators?
looking at my variation, and I'm sure that everybody else. On, you know, this.
Thank you, Dayo. Now we move, so we're just going to assign let's say we don't have that information now. So just to remain objective, right? We assign 0 for any information that we don't have right now. So right now we have just the project name, right? So we're going to assign 0 for any information we don't have at this time, just so we remain objective. And there's we have the projects are equally scored. So we're going to assign a score of 0 because we don't have that information right now. And we move on to, is this project critical to the delivery of the infrastructure project? Are there interdependencies? Do you need to complete this project before another project can begin or before another project can be completed? And you see, if that's the case, yes, then that means you have to assign a score of 1 because that project needs to be prioritized. But we don't have that information now about this particular project, so we're going to assign a score of 0.
For example, access rules that need to be put in place. That we built. So if that means that project is critical. I'm just going to use the second level. It's critical, that access rule is so it will score a 1. But in this case, we don't have the information. And in many cases, you will look at your that dependency will be understand each of this And then that's for your management. Because if maybe okay, yes.
Thanks, Ayo. So if you've completed the feasibility study or the economic and financial analysis by then, you want to know if if there's an established revenue stream. If the answer is yes, you're assigned a score of 1. If it's 0, if it's no, then 0. Yes, Dayo.
Yes.
So you had a question. Okay. Okay. So we continue. We're just going to assign for today just 0 because we don't have project information. So 0 there, and then we want to find out in the capital budget to cover maintenance and operation, maintenance and operating costs. My colleague Hakeem had talked you through the project project delivery process. You go from project identification, preparation, development, project preparation, procurement before actual implementation, and post implementation. You expect that there should be operations and management. Sometimes this is a private sector partner is concessionaire, right? That's the word, to take over that process. Sometimes it could also be the government. So if there's already financing for that O&M aspect of that project, then this receives a score of 1.
The upfront capital investment. Operations and maintenance at that point. That's cost. We have what we're saying is that a project
So let me come in. Oh no, let me come in there. So what's here, right? If you have that assessment done, you automatically receive a set a minimum threshold for your IRR and ER. So if it meets that threshold, then it scores a 1. If it hasn't been done or it falls below that threshold, then your assignment scores 0.
Your question was that.
Exactly. So you should have an internal threshold within your MEDA. If it meets that you receive a score of 1. If it doesn't, then it's 0. This is binary scoring. So you typically expect that maybe if you've done your economic and financial analysis, you should get maybe half a score or something. But unfortunately, this is binary scoring, and to make sure that you remain objective. Next up, we want to find out if there's budgetary allocation secured for project preparation funding. Did Hakeem go through the project preparation process?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So typically some DFI will provide funding for your project preparation activities. And if you already have funds allocated to that, then you can see that that project should be prioritized because it's easier to spend the project or to solicit for funding from DFIs, for instance. So still zero here because we don't have that information now. So has the MDA implemented, completed similar projects? Since this is sector specific, we would expect that you have. If it's an innovative program, for example, then you assign this. Now we're just going to assign a score of 1 across and just assume that these NDAs, you guys have implemented this sort of projects before, delivered these projects before. So we assign a score. Want to make sure that the project does not require large tracts of land. And this is a, should I say, a high level parameter to cover more extensive studies like export analysis expected in the future. How you have your ESI in your environmental and social inclusion analysis. You also have your land resettlement assessment as well. So this is just a very high level parameter to cover the land resettlement risks. So does this require large tracts of land? If it does, then you're assigning a score of 0. Okay, so it does. It's a negative. So this project does not require tracts of land. So that scores 1. We're just going to assume that this project does not require large tracts of land. And a score of 1, or if you prefer, we can just still impute 0 there, saying that we are not that project information just to make the screening process faster and fair. So we're just going to let's assign a score of 0 then. We don't know, we don't have that information. And are there projects, will the project result in direct or indirect economic benefits for surrounding? For example, if you were going to provide, if an industrial plant, for example, you're going to provide, I should use the example from the Energizing Education Program. How Eden had said that during the holidays, for example, the university generates extra electricity. They could choose to transfer that to the grid, I would say, or let's say that there's a way to extend that to the communities around the universities. Now, I do want to go more into that, or if that's okay, then we can, yes, it's very clear. Yes. The next. And you see at this time, if this is a very early project or just a project you conceptualize, just you really don't have that information. There's that risk that this could be very subjective, particular parameter. So it's important to also remember that when you're putting these projects forward, particularly to the funding communities, that you always have to justify. You always have to justify the economic and social benefits of that project. So here we're going to, just to be objective, we're going to assign the score of 0. We don't have that information now. Next, we ask if similar projects have been financed via PPP. If they finance via PPP, then that means there's already an established pathway for delivering that project. So we don't expect any implementation delays. For that, the project is assigned a score of 1. But now, okay, we can still assign a score of 1 and assume that all of these projects have already been going to assign a score of 1 here. The last 2 indicators, we're really just going through if this is a viable project for the private sector. Can the private sector come in? So one of the main criteria as well will be to ensure that private sector participation is allowed within that particular sector. Right now, we're going to say yes. We're going to answer yes because private sector participation is allowed in the oil and gas sector. So that's going to be 1 here. And my colleague Hakeem had already explained that for DFIs, there's a minimum threshold. There's a minimum threshold for commercially viable projects, and then it's typically around the $1 million, about, let's say that's 500 million naira. So if this project approves that, does this meet that threshold? We go back to our project inventory tab, and here we see that this is the size, that's 44 million naira, which is less than 500 million naira. So we assign a score of 0. Just before we move on to the next project, you can see that if we move to our prioritization tab, you can see the oil and gas project there. So it's been assigned a score automatically, but we'll come back to that eventually when we make more sense of the information we have. So we'll go back to the project screening. This will now be a quicker process since we walked through the parameters. So for demo 2, that project is a provision of a bus rapid transit in the FCT. And when we look through the parameters here, it falls under an infrastructure focus sector. So that we assign a score of 1. And the fact that it falls within a priority focus sector means that, yes, remember our first criteria is making sure that we're implementing green projects within national development priority sectors or areas. So yes, we can move along with this project. We scroll down as well, we move on to environmental, the NDC targets. And there we have transition from shift from car to mass transit. So you see that that's a priority for the government, right? So that we assign a score of 1 there as well for demo 2. Remember that the oil and gas project did not receive any score on the for the NDC priorities. Then we move on. To remain fair, we're going to assign the same scores to these under this, apart from the project is ongoing, right? So can project be implemented within the regulatory framework? Sorry? Yes, so we assign a score of 1. Ongoing, we move back to our project inventory tab. It's an ongoing project, so we assign a score of 1. And for these other indicators, 0, remember, as we've agreed. Has the MDA completed similar projects? Yes, we assigned a score of 1. Does this project require large tracts of land, and are there direct or indirect economic benefits? And score 0 because we're not sure, we don't have that project information now, and we're trying to stay fair. We are also assuming that these projects, similar projects, have been financed as PPP. So we're going to assign a score of 1. Private sector participation is allowed within that sector, the transportation sector. So we'll assign a score of 1. Does this project meet that threshold? The capex size is 1 trillion naira. And we assign a score of 1. And we just repeat the same exercise for the other projects. The third project is the construction of sanitation. Okay, so rather than 12 projects, we're just going to work through 3 or 4 projects. So the third project is a sanitation and hygiene facility in the Northeast. And when we scroll down, we see that fits into the priority areas for priority areas for human capital and social development priorities here under water and water resources and sanitation. I think that's, but here we're focusing on direct contribution, right? So just to remain very, the direct contribution, and we're going to check. So here you see it's written sanitation and hygiene facilities in IDP community, right? So not only are we going to check one for water resources and sanitation, there's going to be one protection, poverty alleviation and social protection. Social protection being the most important part, that's reducing vulnerability, particularly for women and children within those IDP camps, if you provide sanitation and hygiene facilities. Remember, you have to provide justification for each of these indicators that you've selected. So we assign a score of 1 there. When we scroll down to NDC priorities, then we see increased access to improved sanitation facility is a priority for the government. So it contributes to one of the government's environmental priorities. And so we assign a score under the tab 1 there. Done for the other projects here. Check if this is an ongoing or a new project. Yeah, it's a new project. So remember, the government is prioritizing ongoing projects. So we check 0. So one last project. The next is what's written there? I don't see what's written there. So let's move on to 5. Construction of solar-powered boreholes for some rural communities. Solar-powered boreholes for some rural communities, and to provide access to clean water. So here, solar-powered boreholes for rural water resources and sanitation. There's also poverty alleviation and social protection. When we scroll down to solar-powered borehole, that means we're using a more efficient energy source. So we're going to check if assign a score of 1. We scroll down to increase access to improved drinking water supply. So remember, it's written the borehole we provide access to clean water. So we check 1. And then the same scores here. Yes. We copy and paste. Let's check if the project is ongoing or the new project. The new project. Okay, it's 0. And here we assume that private sector participation is allowed. And is the project, does it meet that $1 million threshold, 500 million naira threshold? The answer is no, this is 212 million naira. 0. So this is what you do for as many projects as you have. If you see if you look at the other spreadsheets we had shared earlier, there are about 8,022 projects that we identified and screened from the 2022 national budget. So that was from last year. So this can take as many projects as you have, and you just walk through them one after the other. And we're going to move on to our output sheet, which is the prioritization matrix. And we've scored each project on the project screening tab. So the project metrics tab, project prioritization metrics tab really only provides the same inventory in our project, on our project inventory tab, but in a priority form. So if we go back to our project inventory tab, see here the list of projects, demo 1, demo 2 to demo 12. But once we move on to the prioritization metrics, we see that demo 5, that project has scored the highest, 5.4. That's the construction of solar powered boreholes for rural communities. That means it received more, it meets more of the screening parameters than other projects. It's more aligned to NDC and NTNDP priorities than the other projects, right? And it's yeah, so you see the projects are scored in so from the highest scoring projects to the lowest scoring project. Is the last tab.
Some of them have issues.
Okay, so just look at the screen here, right? We'll share an updated document. So this is what you should have on that last tab. Seems like the cloud is corrupt, so we have to how else to send this more tabs, information that you need. So last tab that you should have the project prioritization. And you see that the projects have been ranked there on the column on the first column D. The solar powered mobile projects, you see the small line 44. So this prioritization tab is just output the it's just automatically calculated and outputted numbers here on this prioritization metric. The next tab is the TPP tab. Remember we had to the last two parameters there was to check if you use criteria project. And two main parameters were the private sector participation as sector and the minimum. Yeah, this is review means that this is not a project, but we know it's essential to the project. Review that you remember again to stress. And so this is the output from that screen. We're still going to have individual sessions. We understand that this cannot be. Session with NDA very report this one of the one. Like we leave that record out there for the commission.
So I know you have a lot of questions and we will take those questions, but we have connected online the DG budget and he would like to make a keynote remark before we proceed. I think after his remarks, we'll then take the questions from this presentation for Chizoba, but he's got to go to another meeting, but he would like to quickly make his remarks. So if Lekon, if you can spotlight the DG budget and something to go ahead with his remarks. DG budget, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself and if possible, camera for the remarks. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Can you hear me? And can you see me? Okay. Well, It's I don't know if the DGDMO is still around, but let me, in the interest of time, not especially as you had to break the flow to have me in a brief remark. Let me sort out the protocol and perhaps say that I stand on all protocol. But I'd like to appreciate the representatives of UK NIAF, my great pleasure and make these few remarks. I'll declare this session open. The session long been open. So this session today, the workshop, brings together experts, development partners, and public sector to discuss issues that border on project prioritization and capacity, building on how to better position projects for alternative funding arrangements, especially for, in this particular case, climate-friendly projects. It's not a secret that we face fiscal constraints that are fairly, significant, and so both in terms of the quantum of fiscal resources available, and of course, the structure and cost of these, facilities. So we must aim to get more creative and be able to tap into all available, attractive sources. All aware, governments across the world are very keen on transitioning to climate smart investments in order to deliver infrastructure and public services. And in that process, additional ways to meet the huge demand for climate friendly. To this end, the federal government of Nigeria had put out policy statements and including a firm approach to ensure that we communicate directly to implementing EDAs and evidence preparedness. The National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 was launched a few months back. 2022 to 2024 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper, as well as the 2022 budget circular, all provided policy framework to push for identification of green. The NDP 2025 entrench a green economy, which reduces the harmful effects from industrial and household activity through initiatives such as climate adaptation, preserving biodiversity, and of renewable energy, as well as bioeconomy, which utilizes biotechnology in real sectors, including agriculture and industry, all aimed towards achieving sustainability. In view of the above, we have carefully invited MBAs to this round of training, particularly those sectors are critical direction of government in terms of climate, related impact. Part of the efforts around Nigerian energy transition budget of the office of the Vice President, collaboration with the Office of the Senior Representative of the United Nations Secretary General, deliver the workshop for it is my hope that all of these efforts in the near future. One critical point to note is the multiplicity of solar-related interventions across coordination. We have worked with the National Assembly to ensure that these projects are domiciled as much as possible within the Rural Electrification Agency, which has a mandate to implement sorts of projects. And that way, we can ensure greater harmony in terms of technology, in terms of approach, and even to be able to take advantage of scale. The last round of green bond offerings have shown some lacking in terms of the volume and number of projects. Can you all take this project as we look down the corner in our efforts to increase the economy and move towards. Let me close these remarks by thanking our development partners for their continuing support. This workshop happened early months after the climate finance workshop last December. Beyond this type of gathering, we hope to have sector-specific support to provide, an avenue to actually handhold operators across these navigate to a better project screening and selection and prioritization. As I mentioned to Gail Warrender on the sidelines of the December workshop, I do hope the work to mainstream this intervention next project, get MDAs to produce, package more back. I thank you for your attention. I wish you very deliberations as I look forward to, seeing the outcome on this all important and thank you. God bless you.
Once again, UPNR team to the Director General, Dr. Ben Akabuzi. Us on many of us that see you as a true change agent for the future. So, one quick thing, my colleague Ulumide here is taking email addresses of those that I don't have. So when I send out that, this is the first of several of these capacity building exercises. So we are going to distribute evaluation to sort of improve on the so telemedicine and medicine. So we the next steps I talk about the youth corporate. As I hand over to my colleague, so I agree for from the capacity building command and talk about. So, Prof, thank you, sir.
Does he have a presentation? There you go. Yeah. Can I be done?
Thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This session, you are agree with me that considering the fact that it's highly vulnerable, part of climate change, as we have seen in previous and Nigeria has demonstrated commitment towards the implementation of adaptation and mitigation projects to address these climate change issues. Policies have been put in place as strategy documents. The act has been passed and signed. The NDC targets are set and revised. There's high-level government commitment towards addressing the issues of climate change. Government is also committed towards integrating and mainstreaming climate change issues in planning and budgeting. I have been told that the impact of climate change is enormous. Of Naira has been lost as a result of the impact. But critically, we have been told that there are opportunities for climate finance globally, and NDAs have not been taking advantage of these different opportunities.
take the issue of the green bond from the presentation. What should NDA do differently to be able to access these funds? Here, projects that are bankable. So, before now, support has been provided by the UK Naira to develop the decision support through finance database and to screen 2022 project submission for planning finance. And in December, there was a workshop on the climate finance to acquaint MDAs with different access these funds. So our focus here is on the decision support tool. And then I want to ask, we have this kind of tool in our different I will be considering the contribution of our projects to the achievement of let's make it interactive as we discuss the way forward, as we discuss the next steps. Is there any MPA there that has been giving consideration in the identification and development of this? That has been submitted the budget process. Minister of Environment said, so how do you do that? Which mechanism do you use? Which tool do you use? To identify, prioritize and select projects. Now the framework that they use from Minister of Environment. Greenhouse gas mitigation procedure at the same time impacts on social and economic. You do greenhouse gas emission and meeting our NDC at the same time. That's the vision. That's the consider agenda. But you don't have any clue towards that, like what we have now. When you say so, even Minister of Environment does not have a structured template like this. That is what you're saying. But you do have it at the back of that, the extent to which they will contribute to. Yes. This is an improvement. So mean that MPs will find these tools. Is that what we're saying? Is that what we're saying? Planning. Is that what we're saying? You said? on the database. We have a microphone for him. So we've had tools before. So that we have had before. Because now considers the contribution towards the achievement of the NDC. So, make our projects green, make them climate smart, so that we can be able to access the funds that are available globally in order to augment, resources that are available through the national. That is general conclusion there, isn't it? Okay. Is there's a particular period of what we have seen. That stage, I think, the database itself, the output is also similar, but more similar. Some of the features NDP or two, because for capital projects. When you say database now, database, to me, the worksheet, yes. So we have of geographical location, yes, we have states. Yes. States is, for example, the construction of Ghana, maybe Kaduna, and we for the project title, and which location say Kaduna State is not give us specific location. So it's better we use location. So when we say location, I can say say we just know the state, we don't know the particular. If that aspect of using states can be location, geographical location, it needs to be specific because we are GIS to track it. Because this tool is very good. What I think is very good. So we can subject that tools. Like what we have in Bali, we have to make it more, it's beautiful. Application, sorry. I was to ask you something, it's like your toilet is this way. Please sit down. And you make your contribution before you go. Sorry, sir. So that's just so you have to make it. Because budget is also a political document. You understand? Some people will see states, but it's good that there's geo tagging. That's one of the things that budget offices. If you check the cost circular, for 2022 budget, MDs were tasked with geo tag project. Billion naira, 250 million naira for address the issue of specific location. Have you understand? That social state is there and stuff like that. All right. So the general agreement is that this tool is better on the previous tools that we have. Isn't it? Okay. Now, so what do we need to do differently to be able to NGOs access this form that is available? That you have in your different NGOs. Other resources. So, what capacity gap do you think you have? Based on the fact that have been involved in accessing the So what has been your experience? That the institutional capacity gaps? What should be done to address this gap? Our stakeholders, especially the other MPs and the state office, kind of I will start by talking about the institutional framework for domestication of these ideas. As for instance, most times, we all know align with an idea because the problem. That idea to them. Issues have no package that context so as to be able to achieve the set targets within the time frame. It's been discovered that some of the processes involved in project implementation is such that from essentially procedure fund receipt. We are specific is that we discovered that from projects that have to do with, let's say, procurement of and training of all is so easy. Whereas something that is developing irrigation fields, and some of the irrigation or construction of that. Other sector, we're actually looking at the cost of including some construction, especially small end dams for hydropower, being on the purpose million. Which, of course, some of these green initiatives are trying to. So there are some projects now that probably will still need to inwards. And when we look inwards, a sustain the temple. What what we are other officers from my meeting also share the knowledge and investigate some of these things in their respective facility commission. Some of our participants of the water sector But from other subsector within the water sector, take for instance, the water and sanitation, the irrigation people can start bringing some. When they are regular working. And some of those are the issues. So by the time we sit down for this 2023 and look our NDC pages, and then we'll be able to do much better than. Thank you, sir. So, IER, another slide. Yeah, other issues around this, I think, that, she said, yeah, that's what. So, what are the issues going forward? What kind of training do you think LGs, what kind of training do you think IRBs follow up to the last one that you had? And then capacity gaps. I want to be directed before you say it. Bilateral negotiations, the requirements, these different forms are specifically different from one another. So you need to have good understanding of what the requirements are in each of these different, opportunities. Rather be able to provide guidance for them. After this workshop, what next? That's what I said. What do we do? So let's allow you time to think. If you have something to say now, microphone please, or the campaign voice. That's the vice president in the Navy. Okay. You can use your campaign voice. How do I take notes of what she said? Huh? So, okay, now it's able to provide presentation. You understand? Okay, now is able to provide that project advance. But it's good that I am saying it's something that is, yes, important. Any other one apart from that? Okay, yeah. Very quite new to. And 2 or 3 weeks. When we go, you we have an environmental impact assessment for people from the back, even that want to. And just speaking above your head. But now, it's just connecting to the so it's a new document here. Yes. So have a borrowing requirement with the tips as well. Here projects that can be funded through these different sources. Okay. Round about us for Mr. Tony, the new government. Oh, okay. Sorry, sir. Maybe, in case somebody does not know you. Okay, my name. Conceptualizing, developing. They are not properly conceptualized. The other challenge is that when sorry, sir. So he is saying that MDAs need projects that are properly conceptualized, projects that are properly developed. So MDAs need an old is offering going forward. I think that's your point. Yeah, that's my point. Okay, the next one. Yeah. The second project, and that takes maybe 3. If what you require to implement such project was financed from the West where well, I think those are some of the challenges. Centralization, ensuring projects were packaged. Yeah. Okay. How do you run free? How do you your procurement of them determine that this But if you ask questions, there is document of what are people. There is no proper appraisal. What kind of project that's going to share it among the department? So now, but if we have an issue, rather than contribute to the achievement of the NDC, instead of taking projects, they can be consolidated. Yes, but also. Project in the end. So instead of presentation, we should consolidate. And then the resources for these projects will be committed towards ensuring that well, the resources available from the federal budget through the resources available through these different yeah. Okay. It's not very well. One will not because government dealing with the corporate problem wants to start. So please, who understood his last? Project and completion. So many projects, and he said, then the government parts can be funds, and then through PPP arrangements, additional funds can come from other sources in the private sector. Did you get his point? So what he said, because we have somebody here, what he said. Okay, microphone, please use something else to take microphone. Yes, over there. Okay, sir.
Yeah, I think from what you said, continuing to which I happen to listen to some of them. Have insufficient funds, these are the budget issues that you have.
Sorry, sir, your name, I don't.
Engineer Bevan Yaro, the Better Minister of Power.
Wow.
So, what gives rise to this? And treat what you have already seen. Then let me bring in this. In the process of making the get this sufficient funding, if I get this small scale projects, it is not that you're making. projects which might be sizable enough, then you discover that most you should have is that you should be capacity building and let to understand these processes. In that give you the that project, we very difficult. So one of the suggestions I you should have dedicated green bonds and sectors. Like you can say for this about. If we have that amount, then yes, we can pick up those concepts that we have, those projects which are changing. You will have picked up the valuable projects that are passed. And then presently the projects are not valuable. And then the another project again, which in the process of time, so if you don't use it, something happens. And our principal advice that you want to make, we have like framework allocated to specific sectors. Sector. Then we be able to get projects that can scale through. And then what the tech grants, the principals are not involved. When the budget process comes, and they get their projects involved. Thank you.
Yes, dedicated green bond allocation and level capacity building for ministers, foreign secretaries, for them to have good understanding of why we need to, consolidate. Isn't it? Yes. Sorry. Yes. So, it was mentioned that the funds for projects, and they are not. I think you mentioned something like that. So maybe you are able to respond to something like what kind. I said,
I don't know, I stepped up, so I was thinking maybe you might but I want to say it again. So, I'd like to talk about myself personally. So, I know people. So, there is a it's basically starting with responsibility of project selection and at least arbitrary. And I think that is what really caused this lack of this inability of these ministries that were able to implement their project, this lack of implementation of project by some of these agencies, some ministries as part of this suite. So if we have decision tool that will actually qualified to even be, include is that we have a situation in how we should as a common impediment of future issuances. We have discussed this kind of again, so we can't move forward. So we have to clean up this project that has not been implemented. We are actually working toward how to resolve it. I don't have the answer presently. I don't know what to do. Is to move forward because if we go again asking for people from any investor, they'll ask us what happened to the previous one. So basically, I think it is one of the most important for us to move forward. So we have to clean up that. But the question I want to ask now is where and then you people will be with this tool now. This environment, are we likely going to be using it for selection of this report project? Or just selection of report monitoring purposes. Otherwise, project selection process. For small project, we need to be some of the projects are already small passive. Yeah. Because it wasn't rightly selected, we are where we are. So, how do you this workshop we have here in terms of because we have been having workshops on how to improve on project selection. Also, of course, the workshop is not by So how do we marry because one something on how to improve the project selection, and then of course there is this one, which is a better process of how do we marry so that we take the benefits. Like you said, beyond just the project selection, other issues. But this one that we have, how do we use it to ensure that in the future project selection has been improved for the purpose of that we can actually do. I was talking there, maybe there's any follow-up question. Okay. This is a better select so what is required for maybe further discussion, we have to know the kind of support that is required towards training projects. I think water resources mentioned it, that some of those projects have issues. Oh, you want to? Yes, so that this workshop has been very yes, what happens? What did they when you talk about this happened to? Yes. What actually ethical skill does is all entities that have projects of mental. And after completion, the result for the time that will
if they can pick all those questions right, instead of the ranking will be able to pick each one. Not even further. Because all the ranking will have been there. Subscriber to almost 10 it's almost it's from the notes specifically. Well, I didn't next and quality of having to deal with too many things. Yeah, but it's very useful. Recommend that everyone get apply. I recommend that okay on that one. Thank you very much. So the tool is very useful and is head office, budget office, before you go. FDs are encouraged to use it. In measures on that this tool will be used going forward. And I think from what of the budget office of the federation, in climate change into budget process, isn't it? And then to move towards having climate resilient projects. I know you are the head of the team, I just want to hear from you before you, isn't it? So can we hear your voice?
Thank you for this report. At the stage of project, sometimes the chief executives for the defense officers to get them something that is the climate. So, I think the most important in order to avoid the situation what happened issues and they are executives. So going forward on some of these things, I think it's important that I'm just thinking about this. Share and tell them this is the standard national best practice and we must comply going forward. Otherwise, we will miss company. That we are going to have coming up with very funny projects. Yes, but I'm not thinking. So let us decide on what we can really defend it and know that. Thank you very much. I have to run.
Oh, this is something I social. So, so, and so, but I think principally she mentioned to understand the need for political officers to be able to have good understanding of the need for projects to be green. Isn't it? We need to, stop this.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Ministry of Agriculture. It's like a running thing. Agricultural projects are not. I remember in the second tranche, we submitted about 10 projects and only one. Say these two, I find it very big help in the ministry and all the work. So the assigning of the grade, assuming two ministries, we run we have runoff water, on-tap runoff water that leads towards irrigation. And then another ministry, maybe water resources, also has a project that runs towards. Because while demonstrating, she said, oh, your a 1.0. There's some great 8.2. How did that come about? By binomial, ones and zeros. And then I use my expression, I can put one. In another ministry, they put zero. So it's that for that stage.
But we expect that more agri projects will, hopefully, will be able to. That. See?
So a couple of things, you're talking. Same in terms of selective obligation, because you are familiar with the project process where you're already giving the policy in your ministry. So this tool should our first projects are more gates, the last also contribute to the NECs. But what this tool also does, it also gives you an opportunity to identify projects and you can put forward for. It means those criteria, right? separate process of cost, of innovation. Attract the right financing into those projects. But even in terms of finding, should help you to identify projects that meet these priorities and agree that goals. But you would again, just to answer your question about the more projects, right? Combination of agree. Not in terms of in terms of if they align with the statements, so there will be several other alternatives. So yes.
Yes. On the screen that what we ask. Some of the scores that you assign for individual project. And why the decimal, although we use the weighted average, right? Why although we use what weighted average of the
So there's something, you really need to say something.
So mine. And I heard also that we also have same type of issue of like finance to verify different end game.
Alfred, did you hear what she said? Huh? So, I mean, let us respond. Government is trying to meet the budget process. I expect that this will be in the course circular or budget preparation as the tool that we use. So let the Congress say something on that. Yeah.
How we get to local like across what I'm sure that we deploy everywhere and people you know without trying to bring but then do that. That's the part of the important. If we're able to get something that we're excited about, but in that discussion of the market, for example. So it's the service. I think we should close now. Yeah, we not dealing with stakeholders, with stakeholders effect. We have IAR, PMO, budget office. One part of that.
General environment is so follow up to what you said, because so as NDA score, we've been told that now there's a process of handholding, you understand, help and assist the NDAs in the process, you understand, and which schedule of that. For these different entities will also be involved in the process. So it's not only going to be left to the FDA to do the scoring and the prioritization, people will be involved. Sometimes they don't start the budget. So please, let's the
Very interesting session. A lot of lessons. Right now, I'm going to invite Etobi. Inclusive as we wind down today's session. So, Mr. Commissioner.
All I have to say is for the right group of speakers. This last session, if I had my way, we would extend it because we really are keen to get your thoughts and your thinking around this whole idea of taking this conversation about climate finance and mitigation and adaptation to climate change from a policy level to essentially how you actually pull together projects. And I think my colleagues have already said it all. Our intention at UK9 is to work with the Budget Office, the Department of Climate Change, structuring projects and positioning them for finance. Today, I've heard a lot of questions around whether, how to access these funds that are available and what funds are available. Dollars a year available to support developing countries in putting projects together and help adapt to climate change. Out of that, Africa has committed 25 billion of the next couple of years for climate change adaptation and mitigation projects. $500 million of that has been issued available in getting those projects right. And that must be what we help you do next. We help you conceptualize projects, package them so that you can access finance. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you once again for your engagement, and we look forward to the conversation that we have with you and how we can support you. Thank you very much.
So, yeah, or, that's what showing, this, what you learn, well, I want to, really, society, yes, working. To various stickers throughout the course of the day. When you are thinking about wonderful body yourself, have your email address, you give it to all the emails, sharing the materials of this book. Of the future, because this is just the first phase of a long process, which we hope will start to sort of build capacity. So once again, there's launch there. This take away. Apologies that launch was big, but some people even really engaged that we didn't want to eat at all. So, finally, as I say goodbye to everybody, as you go on.